The Economics of Industrial Prison Complex by Riley Fiedler and Sarah Sun.
Industrial prison complex, a term we use to describe the overlapping interests of government and industry that use surveillance, policing, and imprisonment as solutions to economic, social, and political problems.
Private prisons are multinational companies that profit from the American prison system in nearly all ways. Multi-million-pound global private prison companies are being handed huge amounts of money from the taxpayers to profit from locking people up by cutting staff and working conditions. The Public and Commercial Services Union, also known as the PCS, believe that the going rate for a return is a 7% profit. The prison industry prioritizes profit over rehabilitation of the prisoners. Prison companies are paid for how full their prisons are.
Private prison labor. Prison companies benefit from the prisoners themselves because they are employed to produce goods for private sector companies. They usually use them through menial labor. For example, the prisoners are used to pack headphones in boxes. In 2010, the two largest private prison companies alone received nearly $3 billion in revenue, $13 million in which came from the inmate labor alone.
The self-fulfilling sentencing cycle. The U.S. has 5% of the world's population with 25% of the world's prison population. The U.S. has 2 million plus people in jail, and China has a population 5 times greater and has 1.5 million inmates in prison. In conclusion, more prisoners equal more profit for the investors.
The prison industrial complex is a multi-million-dollar industry that gains capital through trade, conventions, websites, direct advertising, architecture companies, Wall Street, plumbing and food supply companies, armed securities, padded cells, etc. Revenue primarily benefits the investors themselves, rather than directing the money into the rehabilitation of the inmates. More prisoners attract more investors, especially because the population in the United States is growing, meaning the prison population will eventually grow too.
The prison industrial complex pressures politicians to pass laws in favor of lengthening an inmate's sentence. As the occupancy rate increases, the prison population rate must be maintained so that severe laws are made with a clear intent to drive up the prison population.
Passing punitive laws. An example of one of the punitive laws in the rehabilitation industry is the Three Strikes Law. The Three Strikes Law greatly increases the prison sentences of a person convicted of a felony who have been previously convicted of 2 or more violent crimes or serious felonies. The Three Strikes Law limits the ability of those offenders to receive a punishment other than a life sentence.
Criminalizing communities is the process through which actions become illegal. The most vulnerable and targeted populations are young black and brown men, Muslims, sex workers, LGBTQ people, street vendors, people with mental illnesses, and the homeless.
Impact. The impact of the industrial prison complex is that prisons perpetrate and enable violence. Prisoners experience violence in prisons themselves through physical and psycho-emotional assault, sexual assault, and rape, harassment and neglect of many needs, especially health needs. Violence is also manifested in huge patterns of self-harm and suicide. For example, no support is offered to the released inmates. Considering 60% of the released inmates are reoffended and returned to jail after 12 months of being released initially. Thousands of relationships are affected drastically as people are separated from their families and communities. Examples such as the loss of jobs, loss of homes and possessions, and deep social ties leads to a lack of rehabilitation and reoffending and going back to jail.
I work for Department of Corrections, a male adult facility in Wilmington, Delaware. Yeah, I've been there like 12 years right now. In my opinion, private prisons, they really don't have an authority to increase incarceration. Inmate sentencing is through the court system. So whether it's private or public prisons, the prison system itself doesn't have the authority to increase someone's incarceration. So I wouldn't think they could seek that. It'd benefit them if they mainly concentrate on inmates that do have long sentence terms, like lifers, 40 to 50 years. That's who they want to target to have in their system, in their prison, because the longer they're there, maybe they'll profit more. But as far as like determining how long someone is sentenced, that's through the court system. Now, what can happen is once they are incarcerated in the system, they can commit another offense. If that happens, that's another charge added to what they're already in there for, and that can lengthen their stay there. But as far as like doing that to them, having that sense, I don't think they would do that. I wouldn't agree with that. We're a separate entity, and then we have a contract with the state and the court system. Within that contract, there's no strike clause. We're not allowed to strike. It's forbidden for us to strike as officers, as staff of that prison. If they was to do that, there would be a breach of contract, and they could be sued. It would probably be specifically stated in there that they couldn't strike. Never heard that. Never had seen that happen. As far as like bankrupt. It's a lot. These prison systems are funded a lot through the state and through the federal government. To keep these houses, to keep these facilities up and running. It'd be hard for them to go bankrupt. The federal and/or state, whichever state this private prison is there. Usually there would be either a federal level or the state agency, state level, a task force, a independent panel would probably monitor their behavior, monitor prison behavior as far as making sure these inmates' rights are not violated. Because they do have rights. Even though they're incarcerated, they still in system and state system or whatever private system in prison, they still have individual rights as human beings. Once inside, I know where I work at, even if an inmate has a problem with a staff, with an officer, there's what they call a grievance system set up to where they can fill out a grievance form, and they can have a hearing. Or maybe the officer mistreated them, did something wrong to them, that they felt. There is a process within the prison, a grievance process that they can go through. So with that happening internally, I'm sure that on someone from the outside, an agency, a federal agency, state agency, they probably have also the same type of monitoring system to make sure that their rights are not violated. That's an uphill battle. Personally, in my opinion, I don't think that's going to ever stop. As far as like helping the economy or fueling the economy, it doesn't help. Doesn't help the economy at all. Now that they're talking about legalizing marijuana and things of that nature, that's going on right now in some states. I don't think there's a whole lot of money involved in that. As far as them profiting, helping the economy out. The war on drugs is going to continue. That's never going to go away. It's going to be hard to stop any type of drugs coming into this country.
If marijuana gets legalized, what happens to the prisoners that were incarcerated and sentenced because of that? Yeah. Do they get freed?
Depending on the amount that they had. I know in Delaware they're going through that now. Their cases are being re-looked at because of the amount that they had. Was sentenced for like having less than an ounce of marijuana. But the new laws determine how much they can have. Some of these guys are going to probably get released. At least have another trial, be retrialed for it, and then possibly get released. The laws now changed to where if they was on the street and they had like 2 or 3 joints on them, what they call them, cigarettes on them, they wouldn't get arrested for that. If they were distributing and selling it, then maybe that's another issue. Just by guessing, in my opinion, I would say an ounce, maybe an ounce or more, would probably be enough of a quantity to where they could have a charge for that. Every state is different in determining how much that is. In my opinion, I would say that primary rehabilitation. I think they're seeking to lower that recidivism rate down on the inmates that are incarcerated. A lot of these guys that come in where I'm at, they're young, they're high school dropouts, they never finished school. They have incentive and programs within the prisons where they can get their GED. They also have maybe, if it was a domestic violence type of thing or an assault type, they have a program set up for that, drug and alcohol abuse. They go through programs to help them to get back into society. So as far as like rehabilitation, I think that's their primary focus. Like, it doesn't always happen though. So, I mean, it's the rate of them returning is so high. You know, they'll do good while they're in prison, good time, good behavior. Once they get back on the streets, a lot of times the support system is not there for them, and they'll fall right back into the same behavior that they were doing when they came in, or even escalated even more. So the prisons are looking forward to rehabilitate versus profit.
Since the returning rate is so high, is the state, or do you know of any prisons that are doing programs that will like help decrease that return rate?
There are states that are doing that. I could name them off right offhand. They're looking to do that more in Delaware. They have, and it's an ongoing conversation right now that they're having as far as like trying to keep these guys from not returning. They need a lot of support system on the outside. They need the programs. Employers need to hire some of these guys. Like when they come out of jail, it's hard for them to find jobs because they see their record and see what they were in prison for something. And a lot of these companies and employers don't want to hire them, don't want to touch them, but they got to have another start somewhere. If they was to talk to certain employers or certain companies to hire these guys when they're out there, I think that would help out a lot. Fast money, whatever it is, they may have been selling drugs. That's fast money for them, easy money for them to get. There's no end to it, you know. You'll come right back and be incarcerated again. So, McDonald's do a pretty good program. I work what we call a level 5 facility. That's where there's no freedom in the outside world. So when they go to like a work release program, where they go out and actually work at a company and return to that facility, McDonald's have been doing that. McDonald's have allowed some of these inmates to go work for them for a few hours a day, come back, and finish out their sentence. Any other companies I'm not familiar with. The revenue really doesn't do anything hurt or help the economy, in my opinion. I think with the revenue that they generate, mostly it's being reinvested back into the prison system. It's a whole world in itself as far as like housing these inmates, clothing them, making sure they have medical attention that the needs that they need on medical side. They're feeding them state-of-the-art equipment that help the officers. I know myself, our radios need to be upgraded. Cameras, we need to have more cameras. If they're budgeting their money correctly, then I think that the excess money that's left over goes back into the prison. I don't think it really actually goes into the economy, into like reinvesting into the community. So they may do that, but mostly it's probably to help that prison.
In conclusion, Mr. Flowers did not agree with the information that we presented in our Jerry Talk. This is most likely because he did not want to defame his company. By working at a private prison, they may not have provided that sort of information to his position, but he did present some useful details to the prison industry that we did not have prior to the interview.